Hey everybody, Chris Hill from Thunderbolt Defense. I am going to be starting a big push to put a lot of content on YouTube and other platforms so you guys can have some good stuff to watch that will hopefully get you better at shooting and help you maybe with gear and some other choices that you might need to make as far as self-defense and taking classes and training and getting better. But the very first thing that we're going to do is going to be working on a series called Dryfire Sessions. So what Dryfire Sessions aims to do is bring you a single dry fire drill that you can do at home. Don't need anything special. You'll just need your gun and your brain and the drill, and you can do that and hopefully see some incremental or even some major progress in your shooting ability. Now, the thing about dry fire that I stress to my students is that it needs to be done regularly. I think that a very high percentage of your gun handling should be dry fire, but it should be meaningful. It shouldn't just be, sitting up here and, snapping a gun and drawing from the holster and doing, like, it needs to be meaningful, right? A lot of times when I see people dry fire or I hear about people dry fire, or even when I ask students in private lessons to dry fire, I'll tell somebody like, okay, I can see that you're anticipating recoil and you're moving the gun down a little bit. So let's do 10 dry fires. And the way that the 10 dry fires comes out is like this. And they might be doing okay with not dipping the muzzle and all that stuff. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're not getting a good rep or a perfect rep. And the idea with dry fire is, at least in the entry level, and we're going to progress this. We're going to go all the way up to working in holster stuff and movement and austere positions, because I think you can dry fire a ton of really great stuff and not have to hit the range, and you can get better and do it cheaply, because that's also a very important thing, right? But the thing that is really important is that when we're doing the dry fire, that we get really good reps, right? So we want to start with a basis in perfect practice, right? And there's a time to go fast and maybe be a little imperfect, and there's a time to do that in dry fire, and there's a time to do that in live fire, depending on what your goals are. But I think at the entry level, or when we're starting out, which I'll be honest with you, my favorite people to teach are people that are, in the novice to intermediate stage. I think those are the people that I enjoy seeing, unplateau themselves the most. But in that stage, we want to lay a groundwork for perfect practice. So when we're doing these techniques, when we're doing these drills, this homework, as it were, this homework that I give to people frequently in my private lessons, I want it to be perfect. So, and I want us to be mindful of it. So if we had a choice between getting, 100 reps that were 60 to 80% good, maybe, and maybe like, the last 20% were just shitty reps that didn't do anything for you and were bad. Or even sometimes what I really see people when they dry fire, it's more like more than half or even all of their reps are bad. I'd rather take 10 perfect reps than 80 good mixed in with 20 bad reps. I really want to increase my brain's ability to connect with my gun, use my gun as a way to call my shots, use my connection to my gun as a way to fix my shooting in the moment, to shoot better while I'm using the gun, not shoot, look at my target, see that I'm messed up, and then try to fix it afterwards. I want to be able to not make the mistake because I'm very connected to my gun and paying attention to what I'm doing. It's just like when you're driving a car. Everybody can probably, or most people, we'll say most responsible people, can probably drive a car pretty decently on the streets. I'm not saying be a race car driver or whatever, but like you can probably drive a car, not get close to having any accidents, not have any problems, not get any speeding tickets, not run any red lights or roll through stop signs and all that stuff. But a lot of times where people have a problem is they stop paying attention to what they're doing because it's a monotonous task. Dry fire can definitely get like that depending on what you're doing. So I'm going to give you a drill in these dry fire sessions. And most of the time, this video is going to be long because I'm explaining the series. But most of the time, they're going to be, I'm thinking a 3 to 5 minute video showing you what we're doing, explaining what it's supposed to do, and then sending you on your way to do it. This is obviously going to be a little bit longer because we're explaining the series. So we're laying perfect foundation to build on so that we can do this dry fire well and really carry it forward, and hopefully whatever plateau we're on, we can get off of it for free with dry fire. Okay. Now, obviously, you always have to validate skills in live fire, so I'm not saying that you can get really, really great at shooting by just going out and dry firing your butt off, but you can do a lot of good stuff with it, right? So I just got this new gun. I traded a gun for it. It's a pretty awesome gun. I like 509s a whole bunch. This has an Apex. It's a FN 509, and it has an Apex flat face trigger on it. So that Apex flat face trigger is not a trigger that I'm familiar with intimately. I have shot them before. I like them. I think they're pretty sweet. I think they're awesome for a 509, especially because I know a lot of people that have a 509 or have messed with a 509 are like, oh, the trigger's really bad. It sucks. I disagree with you, but this trigger is definitely better than the stock 509 trigger for sure. However, I am not intimately familiar with this trigger on this gun. And even if I was intimately familiar with the Apex triggers and I got this new gun, this trigger is going to be a little bit different than, say, another 509 with an Apex trigger. And it's just going to be a little bit different. And a lot of people will say, oh, no, they're all the same. It's not any different. That's because you're not paying attention and you're not connected to your gun. Okay, so this drill, this dry fire drill, is going to get us zoned in to this gun and how this trigger runs, okay? Now, it's going to look a little weird because I'm asking you to do something that's sort of it's not a shooting motion. We're really isolating pressing the trigger, okay? A lot of times when people dry fire and they say, okay, I'm going to get better at my trigger press, right? They come out, they get a full presentation, they get out on their little target or whatever it is that they're shooting, their light switch or their target USPSA target on the wall. They put their finger on the trigger and they just ease through until the gun, clicks or until it goes off. That's not the drill that we're going to do to get familiar with this trigger. What we're going to do is we're going to take this gun, we're going to put it right here in front of our face. I'm going to look down at the trigger. I'm going to put my finger on the trigger. I'm going to press through until I get resistance. I'm going to move through the creep. I'm going to add pressure, and then the gun's going to click. The gun's going to go off, right? So what it looks like is, okay, pretend you're looking at your trigger, right? Like this. You're going to come up, press. See that little bit of creep right there? And then it's going to go off. And we're going to do that for 5 minutes, okay? We're literally going to sit here and just do this. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to feel the take up, right? And take up is this. That's your take up in this trigger. That movement before you get any resistance. Then you've got a wall, right? So we see that wall right there, okay? It stops here. I get some resistance. And then I've got a little bit of creep right there. See that little bit of movement, and then it goes off. So this trigger is pretty easy to do this with. I just basically am going to the wall. I'm going to get that little bit of creep right there. Actually, it's really easy when I hook my finger around where I normally would, right? Watch this creep. Right there. See that little bit of creep? So already in this drill, I've done it 3 or 4 times, and I've already figured out something that I wouldn't typically figure out on the trigger if I wasn't physically looking at it and staying connected to the gun, right? So here I've got another 509 that's actually gonna look totally different when I press this trigger. So this got a stock trigger on it. I'm gonna go through that take up, and this has got some initial creep right there. and then some more creep. So it's wall, creep, more creep, and then it goes off. And it's got a lot of over travel, right? That's one of the things about the 509 trigger that, especially the one that comes on the old, this is like a 2018 time frame one. They have some over travel, right? So that over travel creates a thing that you might not understand exists when you're out there on the gun with two hands, right? And all these little inconsistencies or idiosyncrasies in the trigger are going to help you understand your gun better and only press the trigger with enough force to get it to go off. And if you're shooting a handgun, the most important thing to do is activate the gun while the sights are on target without moving the sights off target. And if you press trigger too hard, it's not that you can't make a good shot when you press trigger too hard, but it gets a lot harder. If the trigger goes off with a certain amount of pressure at a certain angle at a certain time, whatever, and then you give it triple that, now your support hand and your strong hand have to work harder or be better or be more in tune with the gun to get the gun not to move. So this is a really good drill. It's going to help you get off that plateau with your trigger. I think that it's something that if you do this, I actually do this anytime I get a new gun. I typically will get anywhere between 200 to 300 reps on a new trigger with this drill within a few days of getting the gun, if it's a gun that I'm going to shoot. Sometimes I get a gun and it's going to be like a student gun, or it's going to be something something that is not going to get shot, or something that's going to be used as trade fodder or something like that. But if I'm going to take a gun in and I'm going to seriously get down to business with it and shoot it and use it as a practice or a carry gun, I'm going to get 200 to 300 reps of this drill, okay, with that gun and that trigger, that setup, all right, within a few days of getting the gun. Those were my first 4 reps. As soon as I cut this video off, I'm going to go ahead and get my reps on it, do my thing. All right. This is really, really good. Even past that initial stage of getting to know your trigger, every once in a while, come back and do 20 or 30 reps of it at the beginning of a dry fire session, or even at the end of a dry fire session. It's super fast. You can do it really, really easily, and it helps you be a little bit mindful. So it can be used as a warm-up or a cool-down to get you connected to that gun. Sometimes you can even, I like to tell people to do this in a private lesson. If I see they're having a trigger control issue, we'll do this in a private lesson, because it will bring somebody back down to paying attention to that gun and doing exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing. Okay, by pressing a trigger without moving the gun, and pressing a trigger with just enough force, just enough energy to get the gun to go off, and knowing exactly where they can prep the trigger to, right? So that's another thing that it does, and we'll go over as we go through this series deeper. Those of you guys that have taken classes with me before, or private lesson with me before, you'll know what trigger prep is. If you train with somebody like Jared Reston, you'll know what trigger prep is. It's very, very important to certain methodology of shooting well. But that trigger prep, a lot of times people will do this, right? And they say, oh, that's prepped. Well, that's not really prepped, because I still got that little bit left in there. And go here, and then that little bit of creep right there. So if I press from here, okay, if I press from right here, it's still got a little bit of movement, and I can dip the muzzle or do something silly, right? So we get really in tune, really connected to that trigger, really connected to the gun. We learn exactly what it needs to do. We can kind of learn maybe how a little bit on the side how our one-handed trigger press would feel. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at it and see where it is in the cycle and connect that feel feedback to our eyes, so we can have a third-person perspective on it that we wouldn't typically get, or we can have a first-person perspective on it that we wouldn't typically get. That will just help us visualize how to press the trigger properly. So, like I said, going forward, these videos will probably be like 3 to 5 minutes long, just a quick dry fire technique, and we'll learn how to do it. But you can actually take this right now, go do it, go get 200-300 reps on it on your favorite gun, and then go grab a gun that you hate. You don't like shooting it, or you're not 100% familiar with it, or you don't love it yet because you haven't shot enough, and go get 200 to 300 reps on that and see if that helps you shoot a little bit more accurately the next time you get out there with some live fire validation. That's all for now, guys. And remember, I'm Chris Hill with Thunderbolt Defense, and victory loves preparation.